Well, again, I just want to say good afternoon and thank you to everyone for joining us on this really beautiful Saturday in celebration of the Voces Oral History Project. Again, my name is Jerry Quijano. I'm the All Things Considered host for Austin's NPR station, KUT News. Thank you, and appreciate that. Yeah, we're located on the campus not too far away, not too far away from where we are here, but this has really been a beautiful morning, a beautiful hour for me because a lot of the times that I spend time in these buildings, there is not the diversity of people, the diversity of conversation that's been happening in this room. I've heard the holy trifecta, English, Spanish, and Spanglish this morning. So you guys have really filled my heart with a lot of good feelings, and I'm really excited to be sharing this afternoon with you all. Like I said, I'm going to be your MC this afternoon, so we have a lot of things planned. I'm sure you've seen in your guide the full schedule of events, lots of things going on, and I'll just be moving the occasions along. And really, we're just here to celebrate 25 years of the Voces Oral History Project and their work recording, preserving, and passing on the stories of Latinos and Latinas. Pass it on, make some noise. So yeah, we have a wonderful, wonderful day of conversations and community planned today, and we're all excited to take part in that. We're going to have a couple of great panels coming up at 1 o'clock. We're going to have a Q&A with Congressman Joaquin Castro coming up, some mariachis, and I have been asked to remind people that there is an opportunity to get your photo taken. I was talking to my friend Ramiro here at the table. He said he was envious of me because I was wearing jeans. His wife didn't let him wear jeans. He had to wear dress pants and tuck in his shirt. So if you had to get dressed up today, or if you're just dressed up to the T, which a lot of you're looking beautiful, get your photo taken, have a little reminder, and a proof that you did get dressed up one time, Ramiro, at least that one time. And you may notice that some folks are going around, lots of folks in orange shirts taking photos, and there's going to be a few interns getting some stories, getting your story, getting your perspective on 25 years of the Voces Oral History Project. So please be nice to them, like this nice gentleman right here taking a photo. Just keep doing your thing whenever they're taking a photo, and everything will work out just fine. And even later, we're going to have a KUT and KUTX booth, the Thompson room. As you walked in, you passed that. If you prefer a bit more privacy to record a little something. But that's all the stuff that we have planned and even more on your schedule. It's going to be a really, really wonderful day. But before we get to those great festivities, just want to take a little bit of time to reflect on all the amazing work achieved by the Voces Oral History Project. They've amassed more than 1,800 interviews over the years. As somebody who does interviews, that is a lot of interviews to do with people. And the variety and diversity of the people that they speak with is what is so remarkable. These are important perspectives that sometimes get lost in historical markings, but because of their archiving of this work, these stories are now going to be weaved into our historical narrative at the national, state, and local levels. And the genesis of this work really is rooted in capturing the stories of the contributions by Latinos to this country's efforts and sacrifices during World War II. And I know we're just less than a week removed from celebrating Veterans Day, so we did want to take a quick moment and ask if there are any veterans who are with us here, if you could stand up or raise your hand just for a quick moment of appreciation. Do we have anyone here in the audience with us? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all so much. Well, we are so excited to be here with all of you, and we just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us to have this moment today to celebrate. So in addition to assisting the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, the Voces Oral History Project's collection has grown to include histories of the Korean conflict as well as the war in Vietnam. And while chronicling the stories of these soldiers at war has been at the core of their project, they've also branched out to collect other histories over these past 25 years. There are the stories of the veterans, and then there are the stories of the veterans who are returning from a battle overseas only to launch into a new fight here on the homeland for civil rights in the country that they just risked their lives for. And then there are other voices, the voices of arts and culture, voices of mariachi, and even of those living through a global pandemic. Now, this effort to archive the stories of these Latinas and Latinos has been championed all along by Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez. How about a round of applause? Yes, her work, along with the tireless labor of countless others, I'm sure, over these past 25 years, has grown the project into a true beacon of knowledge and information. It's become a really valuable resource for academics, for filmmakers, and for journalists just like me. And the stories captured by the Voces Oral History Project, they're not just relics of some past that once happened. These are living histories that really help us understand the world that we live in today and everything that we're going through today. And this was especially true a couple of years ago when the eyes of the world became transfixed on an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. This is a small city, just about 15,000 people, and suddenly it was the talk of the entire world. And this tragedy at Robb Elementary hit especially close to my heart. Uvalde is the place where I was born a long time ago, and a lot of my family members have been born there. It's the place where I celebrated a lot of birthdays, a lot of quinceañeras, a lot of weddings, too many weddings, oh my goodness. And I was from a little neighboring town over called La Pryor. So yeah, thank you, it's La Pryor love, I love to hear it. So Uvalde was like the big city to us, you know. They had a McDonald's, they had a Pizza Hut. It's where we would go to H-E-B and to see the doctors and things like that. I even played soccer behind Robb Elementary whenever I was a kid. So for me, for a long time, Uvalde was kind of a second home to me. And very quickly, this place, which for me always seemed like it was going to be a talking point just between me and my family, it was being talked about almost everywhere across the country and really the entire world. And, to be quite frank, people really didn't know how to talk about Uvalde. And one big thing was people really didn't even know how to pronounce Uvalde or where the syllables were to stress anything. And I know that painfully for a fact because, that happened on my own network for a little while, especially in the rush these days for daily news to be churned out, turned quickly. There's sometimes a rush to get things out without making sure that you're getting everything right. And that was a very rough day to be in the newsroom, but it was also it was a day I was proud to be in the newsroom, somebody who knew how to pronounce the city, somebody who knew how big the city was, somebody who knew the makeup of the city. My history kind of with that city was something that immediately became a tool to me that I didn't anticipate was going to be a tool at any point in my life, but then it was. And those journalists, they eventually got the pronunciation right, but that was just the beginning of understanding Uvalde, understanding the city, and understanding its people. And gaining that kind of knowledge is not easy. Trust me, as a journalist, it's very difficult to get somebody to tell you the most intimate things, the things that really matter, the things that aren't just on the surface level. And luckily, one invaluable resource of knowledge and light during that dark time was the Voces Oral History Project's archive of a few Uvalde residents who had walked out of the high school back in the 1970s. Some of these folks who walked out in protest as teenagers had also attended classes as children at that same Robb Elementary. A lot of them were children of migrant workers, which very often meant they too were migrant workers. And again, this is something that hit home very close to me because it reminded me of my grandma Linda, who was born in Uvalde, raised in Uvalde, who went to Robb Elementary School as a child, which was not something that I knew prior to this tragedy happening. And her story, like a lot of those preserved by the Voces Oral History Project, was important data that was being lost, and it's data that's often gets overlooked in our historical narratives, like we mentioned about, and especially so in our media landscape, whether it's in film, whether it's in academia, or whether it's in the news that you read or hear about every day. Stories like my grandmother's and stories preserved by the Voces Oral History Project, they're not always brought to the forefront. So this work today is an especially big reminder of how important that kind of work is. It's obviously important to you, to me, to everyone else who's just decided to spend a really beautiful Saturday inside here with us. And as we celebrate 25 years of preservation, of history, we want to look forward to the possibility of capturing even more stories about Latinos and Latinas in America, because we know, as you can see, there's a breakdown of the kinds of stories that the Voces Oral History Project has worked on. But we, as a journalist, I know there's always more stories. There's always another story. There's always a little bit deeper to dig. And with your help, we can make that happen. We can continue to highlight these stories and make sure that they're not forgotten. You know, I know about my grandma's story. Luckily, I'm a journalist, so I know a little bit about interviewing and have equipment to do so. So I've taken the time already to record some of my family members, asking them questions, getting just the basic info, a lot of the stuff that is achieved by the Voces Oral History Project, collecting those stories about her times as a migrant workers, like the time one of their cars broke down on the road, and they didn't have money to fix it, so everyone just got into the other car, and they laughed the whole way. You know, they didn't care, and they just laughed, and they laughed, and they laughed. And it's a story that I've heard 100 times, but if I didn't preserve it, if I didn't record it, I know that I would immediately miss it the moment that she's gone. I would miss all the stories that she had. And I know that I really can't get all of the stories out of her, but I want to get as many as possible from as many of my family members. And what we're trying to do here with the Voces Oral History Project is continue 25 years, maybe 100 more years on, continuing to collect stories, because stories are not going to stop anytime soon. Everyone in this room has a very, very rich story that could make just the most fascinating podcast, the most fascinating listen, and we know there are many more out there. So with your help, the Voces Oral History Project can continue archiving even more of these stories, because while these histories, they shed light on the past, they also help to sustain us through the hardships of life. They are a reminder that tough times do not last, but tough people and their stories always do. Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to get moving ahead, get going with all the great things we have planned for you today. And here to help me out with that is James Aldrete. He is chair of the Voces Resource Council. Please give him a hand.
Actually, if you can join me in giving one more thank you to Jerry Quijano. If you live in Austin, no matter how stressed the day may become, hearing Jerry's voice on KUT tells you it's going to be a balanced and a much better day. I also just want to do a quick thank you. You put together, I think, one of the best Latino reunions I've ever been to. This is awesome, and seeing so many people here, I just want to thank you again for that. And really, if you take a look at the program and the discussions that are coming, there are some amazing people here. In my family, voting rights lawyers are always going to be my heroes. So, Mr. Kaufman, I'm just really thrilled you're here. We have trailblazers in academia. We have trailblazers in the sky. We have trailblazers in politics, and so many others. But in these conversations, I'm going to make a prediction that there's one thing you're not going to hear. None of these fascinating people that we have here today are going to tell you about the moment where they received the envelope embossed in gold that invited them to tell their story, that invited them to open a door or change history. Because it didn't happen. It's a reminder that that responsibility of sharing our stories falls on all of our shoulders. And so want to, again, thank you all here. Because so many of us, and so many here in this room, not only have the courage to kind of critique what exists, but change things. That's part of the origin story of Voces itself. You know, Dr. Maggie had the courage to take on a very popular documentarian, Ken Burns, when Latino stories were left out completely out of the World War II experience. But with the one hand, she might have critiqued, with the other hand, she opened the door. And through those coalitions that she built, there was congressional action that opened up funding for more documentarians, for more people to tell those stories. You're going to hear that again from Congressman Castro. He's saying, where is our representation, on one hand, and with the other hand, opening up the door. And we have those people here in the room, and as you see them, I hope you do thank them for not just changing things, but also making sure that we're opening up the door. And I'll do my two thank yous, and I hope you do yours throughout. But my two thank yous are going to go to Nora Comstock, and to Sergio Rodriguez, who carries on his family's legacy to make sure that those doors are open for higher education and those beyond. My father passed before Voces started, but we have beautiful photos here. One of his compadres, Judge Roel, so I brought him up here. It is a reminder for the legacies that we're helping to carry on ourselves. I do want to do a couple quick thank yous before we get moving, and I want to start with the most important. But if I could recognize first the family of Dr. Maggie, because they're the big support system that makes all these things possible. So if you guys can please take a stand. We appreciate her, but we know what it takes, and so we appreciate y'all very, very much. I'd also like to thank, she's in the back of the room, but these things do not come together by themselves. The Voces directorship is an unpaid position, by the way, while she teaches and heads up CMOS as well. So I want to give a big thank you to Monica Blackburn. Don't hide behind the cameras. She's right there in the back of the room who helped make this possible. Voces has been growing and is going to continue to grow. One of the big additions we had was Christine Navarro. Christine, I'm looking for you, disappearing at the moment from my eyes, but she's the deputy director. But if I could also ask a big thank you for all the Voces staff and for all the interns, and both current and past, if you all can join me in thanking them. Two more quick ones, I'll combine one. But any current members of the Voces Resource Council and past members of the Voces Resource Council, if you can raise your hand or take a stand so we can thank you. Appreciate you guys. And part of the growth has also been the Voces Scholars Institute, so providing, helping in the peer review process, because it's continually is an academic program that's providing that research foundation. So thanks to all of Voces Scholars and to all the academics in the room as well. One last one. I started with the most important, but this goes right up there with it. It is the friends and family. So it is the friends and family of Voces consists of those members who have been part of our archives, have been interviewed, have shared their stories, and the family members who have made that possible. Thank you all. We're going to take just a moment, because what Voces does best is tell stories. So we're going to do a quick video to let Voces tell that story, and then Jerry will be back up for the next steps. Thank you all.
I've been involved with the program since its beginning in 1999, assisting with those focus groups and meeting with the veterans. I remember one little room, a table, there were maybe 3 or 4 veteranos. We barely had coffee available for them. It was very much the phrase they use in early aviation was flying by the seat of your pants. And it was basically trying to figure out, how are we going to do this?
This is Maggie Rivas Rodriguez. I'm interviewing Judge Albert Armendariz for the U.S. Latino and Latina World War II Oral History Project.
Hispanics, we were kind of afraid to go just to any store. We wouldn't just open the door and go in like we would at the mall, because we were afraid, they could throw us out. Well, because they were like that, and sometimes they didn't want to serve you.
You were commanded to take certain positions and to defend certain positions, and you were shot at, and it was, you were in the trench, of course.
By Maggie doing this project, we all learned about our history. During World War II, I had my dad and his 4 brothers, who were my uncles, served in World War II. 5 served. Nobody in the family, I'm 76, and nobody in our very close-knit family told me, oh, your Uncle Tomas got 2 Bronze Stars. That's important.
why is it that we're not in those movies, and why is it that we're not in those books? They feel as if nobody knows that there were Hispanics like at Benicia at D-Day, and they feel that they made their contributions, and why is that not part of the whole story?
My father was just thrilled that Maggie was doing this because he felt that Mexicanos didn't get recognition written about, and they were being left out of how they contribute to the United States.
As you know, we have very little of that history also seen in movies, on television. The whole culture is not well represented. And so Voces adds a very powerful component to our understanding of the Latino community. That they see the real stories, not what has been portrayed in media for so long.
In the early years of Voces, I'm glad I was able to assist your efforts by helping to secure funding to expand your program to include Korean and Vietnam-era veterans. The Voces Archives now provides future generations with important information about our Latino veterans who have served with distinction our great nation.
Now it's expanded to include artists, musicians, other politicians, people who are real leaders in our community, capturing those voices and those stories that frankly have never been told. And Voces is giving voice to those stories.
January 13, 1942, we went 190 women and 5 officers. As of this day, all the officers have passed on. As of today.
What were the things that were impacting the community? What were the restrictions? What was the discrimination, legal and otherwise, that suppressed progress of the community? And what Maggie has done with this project is to build the archive and build the knowledge in the community, so that people are aware, and that it's, as you're moving forward, you need that information for historical reasons, for cultural reasons, and especially for political reasons.
Marta Tijerina was born in Monterrey, Mexico in 1946, but grew up in Laredo, Texas. After high school there, Tijerina moved to San Antonio.
One of the unique things that we do at Voces isn't just about capturing stories, but it's also about training a whole generation of new oral history scholars and researchers. So giving them the tools and the on-hand, like real-life experience of how to do an oral history and how to do it well. And that's something that I think the center can be extremely proud of, that we are creating being the next generation of oral history scholars. And we've done that through not just teaching and training, but giving them hands-on experience in doing that.
And it feels really good to say, wow, 25 years have gone by and the effort is still continuing. And how many of these types of projects have really gone on for 25 years? Not many.
I think the work that has been done at Voces is critically important. People really are starting to understand the importance of the archive itself, because it tells a different story, an important story that is behind an object that you might see displayed in a gallery, whether it's art or whether it's historical. That behind the scenes kind of perspective is something that I'm seeing that is drawing more and more interest in the field that I have been involved with for almost 40 years now.
So if you love the work that you see, if you love what we're doing at the center, I ask you to please consider making a gift. We need it to continue capturing these stories. We need it to be able to do the work that is so important so that these stories don't get lost, because they will get lost. If we don't capture them now, they will forever be lost.
I'm reminded of a saying my grandparents, my paternal grandparents especially, would use, and that is al que no habla, Dios no lo oye. And, if you don't speak up, God doesn't hear you. You broaden that out to, if we don't tell our own story, if we don't share our own stories, nobody's going to hear them, including our own, community.
Well, it was a great video. I feel like everybody's got their energy up, and just want to give you a quick. There we go. Quick reminder of the day ahead. We have the Q&A coming up with Congressman Castro. We're also going to take some time to honor Renato Ramirez with the No Te Rajes Legacy Award for his dedication to preserving our Latino culture. We've got a lot going on for you today, and these panels are also set to begin at 1 o'clock. So take some time and begin to make your way, and we'll be back here at 2 o'clock or 2:15. And so, yes, thank you, everyone. So I hope everyone had a really fruitful discussion, a real fruitful experience at your panels. Now we're going to be transitioning into the Q&A with Congressman Joaquin Castro, and we'll be doing that just shortly here. I'm just going to introduce the people who will be participating, and then I'm going to get out of their way as quickly as possible. So the participants in the Q&A will be Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez, Director of the Voces Oral History Project, and Associate Professor of Journalism here at the University of Texas at Austin. She has more than 17 years of daily news experience, and she was on the committee that organized and founded the National Association of Hispanic Journalists in 1982. And her guest, Joaquin Castro, has represented Texas' 20th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2013. In his time in that elected position, he has served as a leading voice for the inclusion of the stories of Latinas and Latinos in the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and so much more. We ask that you give them a round of applause and your full attention. Let's hear it for them.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Congressman Castro, for being here especially. I don't know about you all, but every day when I read the newspaper, I'm especially looking for stories about our people. And it has gladdened my heart so much every time I read Congressman Joaquin Castro and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus are insisting that the Library of Congress include more Latinos in our film registries and in our music registries. So he is I know that there's other people doing it, but I think that you're kind of spearheading a lot of the effort.
Yeah.
And also recently there were stories about the gaming community. I never think about this, but apparently the gaming industry is huge and makes a lot of money, and yet Latino representation is minuscule. So I'd like to start off by acknowledging that a lot of people in this room have also done their efforts to make a more inclusive and have more representation of Latinos. But Congressman Castro has a platform, a national platform, and he's been able to accomplish so much in what seems to us from the outside in a very short period of time.
Well, first, thank you, Maggie. Thank you for those kind words. And also to everybody at Voces, to the staff, to the donors and sponsors who've made 25 years possible of preserving Latino stories. Thank you all so much for all of your work. I got into this work about 5 years ago. Really, I'm in my 23rd year of public service. I know, James Alderete, Laura worked my first campaign years ago. Some of the folks here know I started out I first got elected in 2002 to the state legislature and spent 10 years there. And then now I'm going into my 7th term in Congress. And so you can imagine in those years I've worked on just about every issue, on taxes, on immigration, on education, higher education, just about everything by now. But when I became chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I got to start working on an issue that I knew mattered a lot but there always seemed to be something more urgent that came up that I had to work on. And that was the representation of Latinos in American media, the representation, literally how we're depicted, but also our representation as journalists, as directors and producers, as publishers. But I really put my foot on the gas after what happened in El Paso in 2019, where you had a madman who drove 10 hours and killed 23 people and injured more than 20 others because he said he considered them, quote unquote, Hispanic invaders to Texas. And I asked myself how somebody who had really no interaction or familiarity with our community, how somebody would come to that conclusion. And I don't think there is a single culprit or answer, but I do think that part of the challenge over the years has been the stereotyping and the misdepiction of Latinos in mass media. And then really quick, one other piece to it. It was also a lesson for me. Well, I'll tell you the quick story so that you kind of get it. We had a meeting with the Association of American Publishers that we'd set up when I was chair of the CHC. And there were about, maybe 25 or 30 of us on the call, and there were CEOs of some of the top publishing companies in the country. And I asked one of the CEOs if he could name 3 Latinos or Latinas who had had a significant impact in American history. I was essentially asking him a question about historical figures. And this was a very talented man, Ivy League educated man, 50-something years old in New York. Again, the CEO of a company that sends books to UT Austin and to public schools and private schools, secondary education across the country. And the gentleman thought about my question for a second, maybe 5 or 10 seconds, and he finally said, no, I can't. And this man was not trying to be rude. He wasn't blowing me off. We were having an earnest conversation, all of us. But it really struck me, really crystallized for me, the fact that the Latino story has been left out of the telling of the larger American story, and that there is a price and a cost to that for the community. And it's not just culturally inconvenient. I actually think that it makes it dangerous for the community for that story not to have been told, because in its place, what has happened over the years is that cultural void has been filled by the stereotypes in mass media, in hard news, in Hollywood, of Latinos as, quote unquote, the illegal, as drug dealers, as lazy, all of these negative stereotypes, and while at the same time, our history has not been taught in schools. And so you think about, we've essentially been rendered, I know there may be some debate about this, and there are probably historians here, but I think in many ways the Latino community in the United States has been rendered ahistorical in this country. I mean, ask yourself, in your best estimation, if you ask somebody, what period of American history do most Americans associate Latinos with? I think you would struggle to come up with a period of American history or a sequence of events that most of America associates the community with. That, to me, is being rendered ahistorical, essentially. It doesn't mean that our history is not important to us or that we don't share it within our community and our families, among friends and so forth, but that structurally, in terms of what is taught in schools and understood by America writ large, you've essentially been rendered ahistorical, I think. And I don't say that, of course, with any glee. I think that is part of what is at the heart of our challenges as a community that go much deeper even than particular issues about a tax rate or, what education policy you're going to put in here or there. Those are very deep cultural, structural issues that need to be addressed, that you all, I see your work as contributing to filling in that cultural void and that black hole, to helping to tell the truth and the reality about who our community is. That, to me, is the great value of the work that you all do. And I think that most people actually don't realize how precious this work is. So thank you so much for doing it. Thank you all for doing it.
And I better make sure that we have I'm hoping someone will give me a time, because I don't want to go over, and I know we could talk about this for a very long time, all day and all night, really. So I'm very curious about, as you are in a position where you have a platform, but even so, I imagine there are challenges to carrying out that work. If you can tell us some of the challenges that you are facing and what you're doing and what others are doing to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I guess let me tell you what we've done. Again, it covers the full gamut of media, but just in terms of federal stuff, like, so we nominated people to federal boards and commissions. We have submitted every year list of Latino music to be included in the National Music Registry, because our entries only make up a small fraction, less than 5% of all the entries. These are to have your piece of music acknowledged by the registry or by the film registry is literally one of the most prestigious things that an artist can have. That is a notation that would go on somebody's obituary, literally, of the greatest musicians and greatest filmmakers, if they got their stuff in there. And yet, the acknowledgement of Latino work has been relatively small. So for the last 3 or 4 years, in each of those registries, we've been pushing very hard. We obviously met with like the studios, met with all the major newspapers, the publishing houses. Now we're taking on this issue of gaming, because it's very, very popular, especially among young people. So that's the work that we're doing. In terms of the challenges, I mean, one of the main challenges is just bandwidth. Like I said, you can spend all your time working mostly on the issue of immigration, for example. That is an incredibly important issue to the community, and I've spent a lot of time working on it, especially as Donald Trump is talking about mass deportation, right? You could spend a lot of time working on tax policy or on the ACA and healthcare policy. Those are very important, obviously not insignificant issues, but it's a challenge, I think, to me, to get legislators engaged on issues that to them don't seem quite as urgent. And also, there isn't necessarily a law that you're going to legislate. There isn't a law that you're going to legislate to fix some of the things that we're talking about, right?
So what you're saying is becoming a priority.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's why, like I said, after a while, especially after El Paso, I said, no, I'm going to take the time and commit time and resources and staff resources to actually treat this as an issue that we're working on a daily basis. And we've been doing that since then.
So as far as kind of benchmarks, is there some way of having a goal so that you know that once we get to this, I mean, parity would be the ideal, right? If we had parity, if we say that there are, I forget the number of movies that they include in the film registry every year, but if our population is about 19% of the national population, and we say, okay, 19% of those films that are coming into the film registry should be Latino-driven films.
Yeah, we've seen the numbers go up in each of those registries the last few years. In fact, just in the last several months, I met with the full film registry board and the recording registry board, and so we've seen improvement there. We've seen over the last 6 or 7 years, I would say marginal improvement in Hollywood, and some improvement in journalism. And as you all can imagine, some companies are better than others, right? Some are more, or just some are just better than others. But also, we're in a moment where there is a backlash against diversity right now. And some of the corporations and companies are actually taking advantage of that moment to distance themselves from those efforts, even though they were never that great to begin with. So yeah, I mean, so it's, we're kind of in the middle of that. But I think to answer your question, I think how we see improvement is that industries are more inclusive, that the different media and entertainment industry, the branches of it just become more inclusive. And like I said, we have seen some of that, but not nearly enough.
So what can everyday people like us do to support efforts like this?
Well, I hope, number one, that everybody in here, usually I have to say, hey, I hope y'all will care about this. Everybody in here cares about it. But I hope that when you talk to legislators, whether they're state legislators or members of Congress, that you will also mention it to them and let them know that you care about it. Because we need more legislators who are asking these questions when they talk to different corporations and companies and industries, that they're pressing these issues. Because again, like I said, you can talk to them about a lot of different things. And this is one thing that we need to be discussing more.
So, Congressman, how much of a difference does it make to you when you receive a letter? What is the most effective means? Because I know that sometimes people will do a petition, or they'll write a letter. And I come from a journalism background. So I'm always urging people to write a letter to the editor or to submit a comment. And in the news business, it actually makes a big difference. If they get 10 letters about a topic or about a news story, they're like, oh my gosh, people are riled up about that. I don't know how it works in your world.
A lot of it's the same. I mean, correspondence, every week I get a report from my staff about how much correspondence, whether it was calls, letters, emails on a particular subject, and what the position was of the person who sent the correspondence. In terms of reaching people directly, I would say probably social media now is probably the most impactful way to get a message across to a particular legislator, to the extent that they use. I mean, you have a fraction of people that just don't use it at all still, but most people do. I mean, in that sense, social media really democratized opinion when it comes to reaching legislators, because it's so direct and it's unfiltered. You think about years ago when if you wanted to get across to a politician, you could send them a letter to their office, or if you wanted to make a public statement, you might write a letter to the editor, but those were heavily filtered, right? They were only going to publish 6 letters a day or whatever it was. Social media has kind of democratized that. That's the positive part of it. There are obviously some downsides to social media as well.
So this is maybe into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's an important question, because I and a lot of other academics in here have gone to archives and looked up, say, the archives of a particular congressman or an organization, and we find letters in the archives, and those letters make their way into the history books. The letters that go to you, the emails, do you all archive those, and do those go into the NRA?
That's an interesting question, and this is my best, when I get closer to leaving office, then I'll really figure out, what the exact policies are. But
Don't leave anytime soon, please.
I've looked into it a little bit, and apparently, at least for the members of Congress, I'm sure it's different for the state legislators, but for the members of Congress, you're in charge. They become your personal records, essentially, and you choose, basically, how much of it you want to archive. You can archive. I could go through my emails and end up deleting everything and not archive anything. Or I could keep everything and decide to donate it, somewhere in San Antonio or something. And so I think it just depends how you handle that. So it's going to vary from person to person, however we do it and stuff.
Well, we really greatly appreciate all of your efforts, and you're just, to us, you are the cherry on the sundae of a very rich day. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for everything. Thank you for all your work.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of our activities today. I'm going to be bringing to the stage our speakers for this next roundtable. You guys can go ahead and make your way up. This next roundtable is going to focus on redressing historical omissions. And chairing the roundtable will be Trinidad Gonzalez, a professor at South Texas College. And we'll have multiple panelists making their way up here. Hector Galan, a documentarian. Rosemary Hinojosa of the Dallas Mexican American Historical League. Seila Mota Casper of Latinos in Heritage Conservation. And Tay Mariana Nunn of the National Museum of the American Latino. So if you could, please give them a round of applause as they make their way to the stage.
No, I'm fine. I got a chair right here. This is all of us. I think that's an extra chair. Hello, hello. My name is Triana Gonzalez. I'm at South Texas College, History and Mexican American Studies faculty, and co-founder of Refusing to Forget, which is a public history project devoted to remembering the victims of state-sanctioned violence during the 1910s. So if you hadn't had a chance, please check out Refusing to Forget. So I was asked to moderate this session, and I sent the panelists some questions to think about as we went ahead, but it was interesting because Congressman Castro kind of gets at my last question, which is looking at the issue of when you're at the policy table or you're at the political table and you're trying to get stuff decided, and the people you're working with have no clue about your community. How that then you have to become the historian before you could get to the actual policy stuff for the people to understand what your community needs, right? So the project that the individuals are engaged in is engaging in a broadening of the awareness of the larger world about our contributions, about our history. And this public engagement is even more important today in light of the current political context in Texas, where on Monday we had a Senate subcommittee hearing on higher education, where it clearly appears the objective is to eliminate Mexican American history studies, African American studies, and so forth in higher education. This is seen as a violation of the DEI, anti-DEI effort. And so if we lose those courses in the academy, the work these individuals do becomes even more relevant and more important to fill the vacuum that such a change can happen in Texas. Now, we'll see where that plays out, but that is clearly stated by the Lieutenant Governor's priority and what we heard in that hearing on Monday. So with that being said, I want you to understand that political moment right now. That being said, the struggles of people engaging the wider public about our history and our contributions and our heritage is not new. It is a long history of struggling to engage the public. Going back to the 1850s, where individuals were journalists, where individuals were writers, going through the 20th century with Americo Pades being here, but he was also publicly engaged. Jovita Hidad, a civil rights advocate for Laredo, a journalist, Jovita Gonzalez, to others that are still engaged in this work. So those of us engaged in the public awareness of our community's history and culture and heritage, we stand on the shoulders of several generations of people engaged in that. We broke open the doors in the academy, but now the academy is being threatened and having our representation there, right? So please keep this in mind as we hear their stories and what they've done and where we're going from here. So thank you very much for that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow each individual to introduce themselves, to talk about what they do and then where they're going from here. Okay, thank you.
Hello, and thank you for Maggie especially for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm very honored. My name is Rosemary Hinojosa, and I'm a board member of the Dallas Mexican American Historical League. I've been a board member there since 2008 when we first started the Historical League in Dallas. And I've served as secretary and on several committees. But my most favorite committees have been the Program and Exhibit Committee and the Barrios History and Historic Preservation Committee. So now working, we used to do a lot of annual exhibits. Every year we'd do an annual exhibit, but now my focus, because I'm getting older and my energy is not what it used to be, I'm focusing on oral interviews and then helping to produce documentaries of those oral interviews. And I also am a commissioner on the City of Dallas Landmark Commission, where I'm helping to landmark historical sites important and significant to the Mexican American community in Dallas. Thank you.
Thank you. Tess. My name's Hector Galan. I live here in Austin. I was born and raised in San Angelo, Texas. And for the past, I guess, 40 years, all I've been doing is documentaries. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I grab stories wherever I can, but mostly Latino themed stories. And I've been doing this now, trying to capture our history, our culture, our people, all over the country, with a strong emphasis for me in Texas and the Southwest along the border. I just had a national documentary on a couple of weeks ago on PBS called Our Texas, Our Vote, which basically looks at Latinos, you know, in this state and young Latinas and what they're trying to do in organizing capacity. But what's interesting is that that was for PBS, and I think we have to keep our eyes and ears open on what's going to happen, because there's been a lot of rumblings going on that maybe PBS is on its way out. So as much of all the programs that I've done for PBS, it's been our home for a long time. And now some of the other networks are opening up, like Netflix has big offices in Albuquerque and in Mexico City. So there's some other areas where some of our stories are being told, but PBS has been really our home. But when they're trying to eliminate words like DEI or diversity or LGBTQ and anything like that, that's being cut out. And who knows? And I remember when Mitt Romney announced for president back then, first thing out of his mouth was say goodbye to Big Bird. So they've been after this for a while, and this time it may happen. But I do want to mention something that Joaquin was talking about, ahistorical. I've been involved in doing documentary. You know, early on I had a choice. Was I going to move to Los Angeles and work more in the feature film industry? Or because that was my love. And my goal was to have a national documentary on before I was 30. And it happened when I was 29. So I decided to stay in the documentary world. And I do believe that there's some things, major things that can happen with these small stories. One that I had recently called Porvenir, Texas, about the massacre by the Texas Rangers in Porvenir that happened. Now there's a monument there, I think, thanks to a lot of the work that you're doing with Refusing to Forget. But there's one film that I did not too long ago called Children of Giant. The reason I bring that up is because Giant was a film George Stevens did in Marfa, Texas in 1955. And what George Stevens saw then was what we were enduring as Mexican Americans in that town, but throughout the Southwest. Because what was happening is Mexican Americans fell under the Jim Crow rules and laws, you know, desegregation and everything. I mean, segregation. There was one school I was featuring called Blackwell that was there during the time of the filming of Giant, which was Elizabeth Taylor. It was a mainstream movie in America that showed for the first time what we were going through, what we were going through as part of Jim Crow. And that was really the very first time. And one of the key things was maintaining the Mexican school in Marfa. And that, I had a real strong focus on that Mexican school because my dad was forced to go to a Mexican school in Cristobal, Texas, when he was a kid, because that was segregated in West Texas. You know, that's why they knocked Catholicism out of all of us and made us Baptists. But that school now is a national park. And I think a lot of it had to do with this film and what films can do and the attention that it brings. Now nobody can knock that Mexican school down. You know, and that's a small thing, but yet a big thing that happened. So, and that's why I do these films. So anyway, that's what I do.
Can you tell we're all storytellers here? It's going to be a long afternoon. No, I'm just kidding. A long, riveting afternoon. I didn't mean to say that. Like, long. Good afternoon. I am Tay Mariana Nunn. I am the relatively new associate director for the National Museum of the American Latino, one of the two newest Smithsonian museums, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I did want to say I missed the dinner last night. My flight was late, so I haven't yet bonded but we've already sort of bonded in the first 3 minutes with my esteemed panelists, because I'm I've known of them for a very long time, so I'm very awe-inspired to be here. but I'm also want to say that I'm very touched by Maggie Rodriguez's invitation to be here today. She serves on our committee of scholars for the National Museum of American Latino, and I just wanted to tell her how much it meant to me to be here. While I work in Washington, I'm from New Mexico, and so I feel like it's kind of close. We're close in proximity. Before, as I said, I'll talk about NAMAL is the acronym, fortunately or unfortunately, for the new Latino Museum. But before that, my work is really based in the visual arts community in New Mexico. I was the director of the National Hispanic Cultural Center Art Museum in Albuquerque, and I was a curator of contemporary Hispano and Latino collections at the Museum of International Folk Art. All of those have little nuances about the work. But just to tell you sort of from my perspective and why Voces and all the work of my colleagues is so important is that one of the major things that I feel like I have contributed is a major recovery project on the New Deal artists of New Mexico, the artists who worked for the WPA and in the 1930s and 40s. It was a huge labor of love, which I know all of our work is, but it was recovering the voices and the artworks of this group of artists that had been completely forgotten out of art history. And you know, because of many things, because of racism, because they were listed as folk artists and not paid the same wages, or it wasn't crafters, it was another term, that they were paid less wages than their Anglo counterparts. And these were trained painters and muralists, they were sculptors, they were textile artists. And so recovering that whole history is sort of my approach to recovering the works and telling stories from American Latinos, because as we all know, and a lot of the work of Voces and that everybody's doing, is that if we don't record the stories and save the stories, they go away. And I remember when I was very first starting to do the research was, I was like, I'm doing Latino artists of the 30s and 40s, and they would always say to me, you mean Orozco, Rivera, and Siqueiros? And I was like, no, I mean Cantu and Varela and whoever else it was. So that's the way I'm approaching my work at the museum. You'll hear more about that, but I want to share the stage. Oh, you got one.
Hello. Thank you, Tay. Hi, everyone. I'm Selah Mota Casper with Latinos and Heritage Conservation. I am a historian and a historic preservationist. I'm also the executive director of LHC. We're a national nonprofit that solely focuses on preserving Latinx historic sites, history, and heritage. So while we work throughout the country, I will say I'm Tejana. I'm originally from Grapevine, Texas, and now live in Bastrop. We have a few of us that live here, so it's nice just to be here. And such an honor to have been invited by Voces. Long admirer of the work that you all do, and for decades, a lot of the research that we do in our work has been built on significant decades of early work of many individuals in this room, so thank you, everyone. I just wanted to share a little bit about LHC. We are solely focused on Latinx heritage, and we focus on doing this work, and as Tay said, if these histories aren't told, if they're not documented, they're lost. And without these stories, unfortunately, it would be as if we never happened, we never occurred. The detrimental thing to that, on the other side of it, within the built environment, is that if those stories are lost, they're not documented, they're not told, then we don't have historical sites like Marfa, which in September did become a National Historic Park, which is so exciting. It is only one of 3 that tell the recent history of Latinx individuals within the United States. So that site is extremely significant to the storytelling of not only desegregation, but also the storytelling of the history of Latinxes and the footprint that in our contributions here within the US. Because primarily, our history is solely only focused on colonial Spanish history. So as you know, Joaquin was speaking up here, and he was saying, like, what decade, you know, what generation, what story do you most identify with? And I kept thinking, within the field of heritage or historic preservation, everyone's always like, oh my gosh, you're a historic preservationist? I love the Alamo. And I'm like, really? But do we know the history of the Alamo? I don't know. I don't know. So anyhow, we do this work. We work to document, also had the honor of documenting D-Mall and Rosemary's story. D-Mall and Little Mexico had a very early inspiration in my career when I was an undergrad and through graduate school. I grew up in DFW. I worked at the Dallas Museum of Art, and I was walking around one day, and you know, like any lover of history, I thought I knew all the history of all of my hometown and my community. But then I see like a little sign that said Little Mexico this way, and I had never heard of Little Mexico, and it became one of the earliest stories that I began to research, and a project and really amazing organization that we continue to support through various ways. So that is the work that we'll do. I'll share more, but I will just say that we really are here. We're rooted in social and racial justice. We've been written out of history books, and we are working to bring us back into history books and to tell our story through storytelling and physical space. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to add an anecdote to what was said about the architecture and material culture. When I was a kid growing up in the valley, there was a petrified forest in the area that when the Spanish get here, they find and they utilize the petrified wood to create the corrals because it's very sustainable, right? And as opposed to the wood or wire or whatever. And my dad would say, hey, eso es mexicano. That fence is Mexicano. So the things we should think of as material culture is not just the Alamo or those kinds of buildings. It's something as simple as the material vaqueros use to, you know, do their business, in this case, cattle raising. But one thing I want to get to, and Hector's kind of got at this, but I want to talk about your current projects you're thinking about pursuing, and the challenges you might have in trying to achieve those projects. I don't know who wants to go first. Okay.
Okay. Just a quick note, Celia. Before we were Little Mexico, it was Little Jerusalem. So, you know, our communities change from generation to, or from year to year, years to years. Anyway, it's hard for me to pinpoint any work project since I worked on so many over the years since 2008. My intent and focus, and you'll have to excuse me, my memory's not as good as it used to be, so I'm going to look at my notes. My intent and focus of all that I have worked on is telling history from the bottom up. And I know I was at another panel where Olga was talking about the phrase, history is written by winners or for winners or whatever. This phrase that I use, telling history from the bottom up, is something that Dr. Andrew Sandoval Strauss, the professor and author of Barrio America, How Latino Immigrants Saved This American City, he came to do research in one of our areas in Dallas in 2012, and he spoke with us at the mall, Dallas Mexican American Historical League, and he said, y'all are very unique because y'all are telling history from the bottom up. Typically it's told from the top down or from the winner's point of view. But we're telling history of the ordinary barrio citizens of the Dallas and North Texas area. And so that was something that hadn't been done before, and that has been my focus. So I and the mall have worked to memorialize the story of the barrio residents with annual historical exhibits, with oral history video interviews, and related documentaries, which focus on the stories of those barrio residents, stories that have been, as we have all heard today, been untold, that stories of people that are ignored, overlooked, marginalized, they're the ones that we want to tell the stories of. At the beginning, we thought we were simply displaying historical photos at our first exhibition, and showing the facets of all of the lives of the barrio residents, their home life, their church life, their work life, and so forth. But we found out that we weren't just showing photos depicting our history and culture and their lives. We were acknowledging, I think that was mine, I'll get it later. We were acknowledging, validating, and affirming our barrio residents, creating a sense of place, significance, and well-being, and they felt it. For example, if you'll give me a little time here, there was, at our first exhibit, there was this lady that came up and saw a picture of herself when she was a teenager. And she said, I never thought I'd see myself, my picture in a museum. She was so excited. And then, to add the frosting on the cake, you might say, we heard young people and older people calling on their cell phones. That's okay. If you can hold it for me, yeah. Calling on their cell phones and to their tío, to their moms, to their grandpas and grandmas, and all the familia, and saying, hey, there's a picture of grandpa here where he was in a baseball team. We didn't even know he knew how to play baseball. And or there's a picture of Tia Mary in her quinceañera gown. They were so excited. That's when we knew that they felt affirmed and validated, that somebody, Celia, you sent a greeting this morning, an email, and under her name it says, hear my name, ¿verdad? And I think that's what we did to the community. They heard their name, they saw their faces in those pictures, they felt good. Their well-being and their esteem was raised by what we were doing. And so that's, just something that we've tried to continue. Now that some of us, I think I and one other person are the only other persons left from the original group of Dama. So we don't do exhibits anymore since the pandemic because it's very, it's a time consuming, takes a whole year. So now I'm focusing on oral interviews and documentaries to tell our story.
That's great. Yeah, I had heard of Little Mexico in Dallas, the barrio. I had heard about it. With the name, you mentioned WPA, Russell Lee. He was a famous WPA photographer back in the day. She was mentioning a picture that she saw. I was doing a film on Los Lonely Boys, who's a musical Texican rock and roll group out of San Angelo, and I needed some pictures of cantinas, Chicanos in cantinas. And I knew Russell Lee had been in that barrio, they call it La Loma, San Angelo, taking all kinds of pictures, and I had seen him. So I went to his collection and I found the perfect one. And then I put it in the show, and my sister was there watching with me the rough cut, and she goes, oh, there's Daddy. Sylvia, what's the matter with? Stop it, go back. And I went back, and she said, there. And there's my father getting drunk at the Roxy bar that's still standing in San Angelo. And he's wearing his little tie. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, Daddy, they have your picture in Washington. But it's so funny. These stories. Now, you mentioned what we're doing next. I just finished a film. And prior to that one that just aired, I did Porvenir, Texas, and then Children of Giant, and then before that, Willie Velasquez, who's one of my heroes that I told, Joaquin, because his mom was involved with Willie in the Raza Unida party as well. And so, I'm always looking for stories. The next one after this one that I did, because a lot of my stories, after I finished doing news and public affairs, because I used to work for Frontline in Boston, and news and public affairs, there's never a happy ending. There's always, that's what news and public affairs is, black hats and white hats. And I don't necessarily like that. And the reason I left Frontline, which was an incredible gig to have to begin with, because it, was unlimited budget basically, and that's what we always fight for, budgets to do these shows, and it's really, really hard. One thing that we as Latinos, I don't know what it is in our culture, or whether we're just, we don't like to ask for money from people. Well, I've completely changed my tune. I asked everybody. If you're from Coca-Cola or AT, they hide because I'm on them. We have to learn to do that, to do these stories. And another thing, I noticed that a lot of well-pocketed Latinos, business people, and so forth, they don't really invest in our films. It's either they don't understand history or documentary to invest. So we say Jewish Americans invest lots into their history, but we don't. And believe me, I know. I've gone up to very well established business people, not that I'm, and it's the other people that you wouldn't expect give you that. But I forgot what I was saying about news and public affairs. The reason I left it, the last one, they asked me, Hector, will you do a film on Selena? And I knew that it was news, and I said, no way. There's no way I'm going to do that. I'm not doing a front line on Selena, because I knew what they wanted. And that's, to me, being a Tejano and our culture, I just, that at least I could stop it. And I did. And I left. And another thing is that I didn't own the films. You have to own your films because there's an aftermarket, and you have to make money. And then I'm real proud of what, like today's gathering, 25th anniversary, our archive, what Maggie's doing, because I saw you when you first started this, which is great, because that's what I do. I've got thousands of hours of footage, so maybe that's my next, it's time. I'm getting older, I can't run as fast as I used to, especially the news and public affairs stuff, because sometimes I was in the thick of it, man. Whether it was, gun violence or in a prison. I spent a long time in a prison doing a film, not me. But, and I had mentioned one final, the next thing I'm doing, I did a series that's on Amazon right now, and I think I'm really, because the BBC and those guys are the ones that do these, and I think I'm the only Chicano that's ever done it. It's called Ancient Roads from Christ to Constantine. And it's 6 hours. And it's about how Christianity started and why. And it's not an evangelical approach, it's history. When I was in San Angelo, as I mentioned, they would catch us there, the Baptists, and they would put us in the Primera Iglesia Bautista, and you had to assimilate. In order to survive, okay, I'll become a Baptist. So we all became Baptists. I always wondered why the First Baptist Church downtown was so incredibly rich. But yet, we were in the Primera Iglesia Bautista that was totally segregated. We were very poor. But anyway, by the time it came time to get baptized, in Baptist, you get baptized when you're older, when you know what you're doing, supposedly. By that point, I was already a hippie. And I didn't even care. My hair was this long. You know what I'm saying? And to hell with it. So I didn't really learn anything until I was in Israel doing this major series. I was on the River Jordan, where legend says that Jesus Christ was baptized. And hey, to hedge my bets, I said, why not, man? I went in there and I baptized myself. If there is a heaven. But anyway, you get to do all these things. So I think I'm going to do Ancient Roads Part 2. That's my next one, from Constantine to the First Crusades. And gives me a little bit of break from some of the things that I've been doing, because I love history. That's why we're here. We love history.
And we're all dropping our glasses.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can try and tie this all together, past, present. And I love that you're Damal and we're Namal, so that makes me not feel so lonely anymore. I have a Russell Lee story, and not that we should give Russell Lee so much information, but or so much attention, but I think it plays well into this. In the WPA research and the work I did, which was my dissertation, and then I got hired by the Folk Art Museum, so it ended up being my first exhibit ever as a curator, and there was a lot of unknowns, unknown people. I mean, we were not named in the photos of the 1930s and 1940s, and when we were, very rarely, and the artists weren't named in documentation either. And so, that was it's because I read a lot of Nancy Drews when I was a little girl, I think. But what I would do is, when I would go give talks, when the exhibit opened, we had a big reception, and lots of people came, and all of a sudden more stories came out, right? So as that happened, then my book came out, but it was after we were able to capture all those extra stories that we didn't know about, right? And when that stuff was going on, I would go to do talks in the communities in New Mexico, and I was up in Costilla, which is very north. It's north of Taos. And there had been Russell Lee archives at the Library of Congress and other places, and he had done a series of photos of Costilla for the Federal Agricultural Project, something or other. And so he had done photos of, the women artists were the hardest to find in this project. And he had done photos of a weaving project, of a federal art project, WPA weaving project in Costilla, which I didn't know about. And there's a photo of the series. There's pictures of the artists with their weavings, and there's prices on them. Apparently, you could go and buy them from there. There was a photo of all of the dyes and the technique, and so that photo is labeled like with 2 paragraphs. These are walnut shells, burdock root, sage, cochineal, azul, something, I can't remember. And it just goes on, at the WPA Weaving Project. And the photo of the 3 women weavers just said, workers at the WPA Weaving Project. And that really incensed me. And so I would show up. There were so many unknown, photos, unnamed photos, unrestored photos, that I would go and show them in my talks. And there I was in Taos, New Mexico, and I tell the story about all the materials and the 3 women, and a hand shoots up from the audience that says, "Those are my tias." And so, and I wish I could remember their names right now because they're the greatest New Mexican names in the whole wide world. And the great thing is that with the family and we wrote to the Library of Congress and said, these artists have now been identified. We have proof. You need to change your metadata. So going from that approach to starting a brand new museum about Latino everything. It's not the Latino History Museum. It's not the Latino Art Museum. It's not the New Mexican Art Museum. It's not the Nuevo Mexico. Yes, it's not that museum. It's a museum from the National Museum of the American Latino. So trying to take that community approach and applying it to a national museum at the Smithsonian, which does not have a site yet. Cross your fingers, light your candles, maybe this month. That they will name the site. It's in Congress right now. There's a bill going through Congress right now. For those of you who don't know, and I'll just be super quick, and then the National Museum of the American Latino is one of 2 of the newest Smithsonian museums. And as I said, we don't have a building yet. The other museum is the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. We were passed in the omnibus bill in December 2020, in the middle of COVID, and they just snuck us in. And the Smithsonian was even surprised that it was moving that fast. So if you haven't heard about us, that's why. But the other thing is that we have been trying to plan for a new museum that wasn't expected so soon, but we're glad it's here. So we did strategic planning, which I have a love-hate relationship with, but the main thing in the strategic plan, it has our mission, our vision, et cetera, but the main thing is that says that community is at the center of everything we do. And this is a government organization, public-private government organization. So when you talk about challenges in covering the whole Latino history in the U.S., but also knowing that we have connections everywhere else, ni de aquí, de allá, that is a big thing. So how do I take that, those photos of Costilla to communities and name them? How do we co-steward? How do we build a collection? What do we collect? What do we not collect? And also, how do we totally, and we've been talking about this at our table, we know that National Museum of the American Latino won't be the end-all of Latino museums. So many so many organizations that we've all worked with, that I've worked for, was doing this work a long time before the Smithsonian Congress decided to do a museum. And how do we do co-stewardship? How do we make sure that some collections, lots of collections, should stay in the community or with the family, but the Smithsonian can still digitize or make them accessible. I mean, how do we do all of that? That is a 4-week seminar with these panelists and the audience to hash it out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I love hearing that the museum's approach and written in the strategic plan. So 3 to 5 years that we're going to have community outreach and stakeholder engagement, which is so important. So anything that LHC can do to support you, please let us know. We are your biggest cheerleader and appreciate the work that you're doing. So I think the question was, what are you currently working on? Is that right? And challenges. Within history and historic preservation, anytime you're focusing on any type of Black or brown history, the biggest challenge is documentation. So every day it is a challenge just to do this work. And I'll give you an example of one of the first projects that I first worked on as an intern here for the State Historic Preservation Office. I was working on a heritage tourism book with amazing scholars and all of these brilliant minds, and myself and my colleague Joel, we were looking for sites that told the Tejano experience here in Texas. And so, I'm going through my mental archive, like what histories do I want to tell? What should we share? I was like, I know, we should tell the story of LULAC. Nobody knows about LULAC. Let's tell LULAC's story. So I started looking through the database within the state. And at the state level, at the time, there was no historical marker that was associated with LULAC. And this was in 2013. And there was also no site associated, and to this day, there is still no site associated with LULAC in the National Register of Historical Sites, nor at the state level. That's a total different story. But but I will tell you the biggest challenge behind that was the documentation. So fast forward 10 years later, years later, I am working for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is the national nonprofit that focuses on preserving America's historical and cultural sites. And again, I'm going back through my Rolodex of histories that I know aren't being told, and that we need to tell America about these stories. So I start to, again, research LULAC, and was doing national outreach, reaching out to historians, reaching out to local, state, federal, national friends and folks, and we just could not find a site that still existed that was historically significant to the storytelling of LULAC. Thankfully, I was able to find one in Houston, LULAC Clubhouse Council 60, who was at the forefront during the most formative years of the Mexicano, Chicano, Latino civil rights movement during the 50s and 60s, and it was the de facto headquarters of LULAC. When I first approached them, they were going to demolish the structure to sell it to the restaurant across the street because they could make a lot of money and the restaurant needed more parking. Yeah, so they were going to demolish this building that they had owned for, at that point, would have been 80 years that it was in LULAC's hands, and was able to just share with them how significant this is to not only Houston's history, but Latinos' histories and American history. But that documentation wasn't there, and the storytelling wasn't there. They knew, they were LULACers, so these individuals knew, but the community didn't know. Like, our schools aren't telling the story. They're not teaching through place at the clubhouse. The state didn't know the story. I was just up in Washington, and I'm so used to saying LULAC, and everybody knows what LULAC is. And somebody raised their hand in the back. I'm like, sorry, what is LULAC? And I'm like, see, we have so much work to do. So that is one of the biggest challenges. One of the things that we are working on to help change this is one of our biggest efforts is to help preserve and save Latinx historical sites throughout the country. One of the most recent sites that is one of my passion projects, I've been working on it for 8 years now, is Rio Vista Farm outside of Socorro, Texas. So if you've ever been outside of El Paso, There's a small town called Socorro, about 30 miles into it. And I stumbled on that site same way, the way I always approach my preservation practices, which is what stories aren't being told, what stories should be told. And this one was with braceros. I wanted to elevate the history and contributions of braceros. During this time, there had been few books that had been written on braceros, but it was mostly around the agricultural commodification around braceros, like agriculture, how much had it grown, immigration. The Smithsonian did beautiful work around the Sweet Harvest exhibition, and so I worked with them to help to find sites around this. And thankfully, I was able to find Rio Vista, and by the time that I got there, this adobe structure, like there were 821 structures, and they were all dilapidated, falling, and the city who owned the site did not know the history of its association with braceros, even though it was the very first federal reception and contracting center whenever it came here to Texas. It was the very first one, y'all. And the city where it was locally placed did not know about it. And as a historian, I'm always thinking why. And so I was like, oh yeah, documentation, because they didn't know about it. Thankfully, the site still was there. That is rare. Our sites are rarely ever stand the test of time because of development and just Anglo colonialism. And so we were super lucky. I will fast forward to say that after doing emergency stabilization, documentation, federal government did not have documentation. I had to rely solely on the oral histories of braceros and document their histories, tell their stories, which was very impactful to their families. For many families, many did not know that their fathers or abuelos had been a bracero. It's a story that we don't share because we are a laborious community. But through this story and site, we were able to document hundreds of bracero stories that were coming from all the way from South and Central Mexico to get their contracts, to work here for 6 months, go back to their family and their children, come back and do it over again. And in April, we were super excited that we did a ribbon cutting and we designated it the most recent National Historic Landmark associated with Latino history in the United States. Again, it's one of the, thank you. Yeah, super exciting. Yeah. Less than 1% of sites listed in the National Register of the United States, which tells the stories and the sites and places historically significant to the United States, less than 1% are associated with Latino history. So if there's anything that you walk away with, just think about that. Whenever you're walking around and looking at our beautiful courthouses and you're looking at this beautiful grand architecture in the historical markers or national monuments, please remember that our histories continue to be erased, and without this work, our histories won't stand the test of time. So I just really want to say thank you to everyone again here. I will get off my soapbox because I can talk for days, and I'll stop.
I want to thank everybody. We got about 5 minutes for questions. So if somebody has questions for the panelists, we can take them now. I don't see, you look like my students. By the way, I was the first Latino co-op at the Smithsonian in '99. I was at the Center for Folklife, but it was in response to willful neglect. Oh, okay. So, well, the second, yeah, yeah. So you were there. That's how you know my name? Okay. I didn't know my name was there. I'm notorious, I guess. Yes. So, please, if you could stand up and state your name. I don't have a mic with me. I'll walk over there.
My name is Jason Rivas. My question is, we've heard a lot about how y'all preserve and what are y'all preserving. I'd like to know why you are doing the work that you're doing. Why are you preserving these stories?
So why are you preserving the stories? Yes.
I can tell you, as I said before, because one, we want to tell history for us in Dallas, we want to tell history from the bottom up. That's not to say that we don't talk about those that maybe started with humble beginnings and rose up, but we still want to tell history from the bottom up. But the second thing is that we want to collect this history, these oral stories, these authentic stories from people that's coming from them before they pass. I was telling Celia that last year we did interviews with our eldest. One of them was almost 103 years old. This year, 2 of them, including her, have passed away. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. We need to get those stories so that they're not forgotten and that people will know that they're validated, and the general public will know this story belongs to the American experience also.
That was good. Well, I think that in order, I forget the famous line. Can you help me? If you're destined to repeat it, if what? So you refuse to forget. Now, I grew up in San Angelo, but my parents, they had it rough around that time. And, you know, I wanted to know what they were going through, because that's part of our history. They lived through it. It only makes us stronger. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's to come forth and say, yeah, I remember how we were segregated. I remember how I used to hide in the aisles because my mother couldn't speak Spanish, and she had to go to the cashier, and they were all Anglos, and I remember that. You know, well, I don't want to live that anymore. And I want people to know what we went through, but we survived, and we did it. Because there's still, like, you know, SB 4 that's being passed here in Texas, the racial profiling law. We're still having to go through that, you know, that our parents went through. And they're trying to, you know, so it's good to know history, because otherwise it will be erased. It will be erased.
Okay, Emilio Zamora, History Department here at UT Austin. I agree with you. We have a lot more work to do. We are being erased, but I want to also acknowledge all the work that is being done since the 70s. We have thousands of titles of books and articles that have been produced since the early 70s, 71, 72. And we made use of that information. We fought the very important historic fight against the folks in the Texas Board of Education. The standard curriculum in the state of Texas and many other states do not say much about us. And when they do, they misrepresent us. But we fought that, and that's very important in our history. We also have one of the most successful small presses in the country, Arte Público Press, that has done so much work for the last 20 years. They also have a recovery project that has recovered tens of thousands of records that are now available electronically to researchers. We now have, for the first time, a history book that is now being made available to school districts, Mexican Americans in Texas history. I'm one of the co-editors and co-authors. If you're interested, please buy it. We also have a major genealogical movement in the state of Texas. We have major genealogical organizations in the major cities and even smaller towns in the state of Texas. And they've been meeting annually and sharing their information. They're now talking about those family trees, now connecting and building a forest. And it's a very real accomplishment. I could go on, but I think it's also important. It's important to hear you all, and thank you for your testimonies. But it's also important to acknowledge the significant work that we've been doing for so many years, and that continues. What exists now is part of the longer trend that begins even before the 1970s. We were writing, we were speaking, writing books and articles, newspaper articles, and so forth, since 1848 and before that as well.
I think we're out of time. The came. So if you want to continue the conversations, just go ahead and mingle with us and ask us questions. I'm sure we'll free to respond to whatever conversations you want to have. But at this point, I'm gonna have to call the session to an end. And a round of applause for the panelists.
All right, folks, I'm going to ask that you take your seats and allow us to get back onto the schedule. Only got a few more things for you, or planned for you this afternoon, so we'll go ahead and get started with that. Excellent, excellent. Well, our final piece of business, or one of the final pieces of business this afternoon, is the presentation of the No Te Rajes Legacy Award. And to present that award, please welcome back Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez.
Thank you so much. I am delighted. I am delighted to have this in our inaugural award, the No Te Rajes Legacy Award. So, to me, the phrase no te rajes means this. If someone has committed to doing something, has said, oh, I promise you I'm going to do that, and then they try to get out of it, and then you said, no te rajes. Honor your commitments. Do what you said you were going to do. And I've talked to other people, I've asked other people, what does that phrase mean to you? And so one person told me that to them that no te rajes means to step up, to stand up for what you believe in, to stand up for what is important to you, and to prioritize what's important to you. So the person that we're honoring for the first time is Renato Ramirez, who has really, I think you're going to see this video in a minute, has really demonstrated the entire spirit of what it means to step up to your commitment, both at his local level, to his family, to his community, to the state, and to his country, time and again. And Renato is someone who has been blessed with an incredible mind. And so people come to him and ask him, and that mind has gotten him places. So Renato became a bank president in Zapata, Texas. So he's been very successful. But it's not just about that. Renato has used his own personal wealth, but also he's figured out ways to leverage his position to get some resources for other people over and over again. And I can't tell you, every time I talk to him and he tells me something new that he's doing for somebody else, I keep on thinking, if there's a way that we could just bottle him up, we would be in such a better place altogether. So we have this little short video that I think will really demonstrate to you why he is so deserving of this first No Te Rajes Legacy Award.
Renato's always been a very busy. He can't sit still. He's always has to be doing something. His mother used to tell me that as a little boy, if he didn't have anything to do, he would sit there and tie and untie his shoelaces just to keep him busy. After 60 years of marriage, I think I can pretty much know what makes Renato Renato. He's a go-getter. So he's going to do everything in his power and what he can do to accomplish the goals that he sets out.
He was on the board, the Tejano Monument Board, and you have to have someone that is sort of focused on how to get to the end. And that's what Renato did. I think he kept the focus on how do we get to the end. And that's where he brought me in. I'll never forget. I know your skill set. I need you to be involved in this. I need you to help us so we can finalize where we're going to put this thing. And so that's when I jumped in.
The attitude that he's always been, I will do it, it will get done if it's within his capabilities.
A lot of it was you had to raise money. It was an expensive proposition, and I think he was the key.
We did 100 of these to start the fundraising, and what I did, I bought a bunch of them. I think it's about 20 of them, and then I would induce people to say, look, this is what you get if you give me a big check.
The Tejano Monument came to fruition thanks to countless hours he spent garnering support and funding to make it a reality. Renato never stopped. His energy and commitment applied relentlessly is why we celebrate today.
His commitment to see that things are done and appreciated. Starting out with an orphanage in Mexico, he felt that that needed to be supported. The Boys and Girls Club here in Zapata, the commitment to supporting the mariachi programs at the different universities. Then, of course, needless to say, the Voces program, when he found out about it, he's fully committed to that.
You know, basically, as I think it's well known, my older brother joined the Air Force as soon as he graduated from high school. Again, lack of resources to go to college and so on. And so he unfortunately was killed late January of 1952. That hurts, and so I feel that the Voces program brings a lot of attention to the plight of the Mexican Americans. Maggie has done a tremendous job in bringing out the heroism that many Mexican Americans, and we have some here in Zapata that died heroically in battle. And so that's something that I'd like to focus on, that we have a lot of very brave Mexicans that will lay their life down for this country.
So I think from one thing leads to another project and another project and another support of whatever it is that we can accomplish. Mm-hmm.
Renato's unwavering dedication to archiving and preserving this history ensures that the Tejano culture will continue to thrive and be celebrated for generations to come.
Texas treasure, South Texas icon, extraordinary leader and philanthropist, Voz de Texas. That's Renato Ramirez. We thank him particularly for education and being the powerful and generous force behind the Tejano Monument at the state capitol and mariachi music in Texas. Mil gracias, my friend.
You know, the vaquero that's on horseback, I've always looked at that vaquero and thought of Renato. I'm like, that, to me, that's Renato, because he's a horseman. He's a tremendous horseman. And so just for me personally, the involvement and what he meant to getting that there, when I look at that vaquero, I think of Renato. I really do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Renato Ramirez.
Thing is, I wrote a speech. Sitting through a number of visits here and the things that came out brought a lot of memories to me. It brought a lot of memories. I graduated from that great school in Brazos in 1961, and at that time the Corps Cadets was mandatory. I came out with a commission as a second lieutenant, and I was assigned to the artillery battery in Fort Sill. I became an expert on missiles, the Sergeant missile system and the corporate missile system. But in 1962, I'd been in the service about 9 months. We had that problem in Cuba, and we ended up with that Bay of Pigs invasion and negotiating to get those people back, and they brought them back in the military. And the military said, well, we got a bunch of enlisted people here, no officers. So I got a little message saying, your MOS, and if you don't know what an MOS is, military occupational specialty, has changed from artillery to infantry. And you are now a company commander of a Cuban company of 200 Cubans. And I was sent to Fort Benning. I experienced discrimination there towards the Cubans as well as the Mexican-American staff that was unbelievable. And so I struggled through that and got out and went out to do my thing. Because of my service and because of my brother, I felt committed to help the Voces program, and I did that back when we started at the Tejano Monument. And I want to address, and at the Tejano Monument, the most important individual in the construction of the Tejano Monument was Cayetano Barrera, Dr. Cayetano Barrera. He came to Austin in the year 2000 and did a tour of the Capitol grounds. And he was appalled at what he saw. In the governor's office, there was a little painting of a Mexican hut. Why not an hacienda? Why not a charro that's well-dressed? Then you'd go down to the basement, and there was a Mexican soldier on his knees with his hands tied behind his back, and a military guy with a sword to his neck. Supposedly it was Sam Houston in Santa Ana, but who knows? And then you'd go down to the basement, and you see a bunch of pictures, and the pictures you would see were Mexicans in dirty clothing carrying lumber down there, and the Anglos in suits with hard hat and goggles and the drawings and so on. And so Dr. Barrera walked away saying, man, complete discredit. And so he got back to McAllen, called an attorney, and said, form a corporation, the Tejano Monument, Inc. He named himself the CEO, and then he went out to solicit members. And first one was Richard Sanchez, who was the chief of staff for Quino Flores. Next one was Homero Vera, a museum curator and an author that had written a lot about Mexican ranches. Dr. Andres Tijerina had written a lot of books about Mexican ranches. Then he got Jaime Beeman, who is originally from Tampico, but grew up in Brownsville and got a degree from the University of Texas in architecture and has the Casa Bella Architects here in Austin. And the final guy he chose was me. And so we went and got together and talked about ideas. We contracted Armando Hinojosa, who's a great artist. He's graduated from Texas A&M Kingsville, A&M now, Kingsville. But he has a number of structures all over the place. He's a tremendous artist. And started working on the appearance of the monument. We realized that we needed to get the legislature to pass a bill creating the Mexican-American the monument, the Tejano Monument. And so in our first meeting with bureaucrats, the person that we were dealing with said, Mr. Ramirez, the contribution of Hispanics isn't married going on the Capitol grounds. And he got a taste of my reaction. I said, oh, who discovered America? It's Christopher Columbus. That wasn't his name. His name was Cristobal de Colón. It was 42 Spanish sailors on 3 boats. We were in Texas in 1519. You got the Plymouth Rock in 1620. You got the Texas in 1830, 300 years later, and we haven't done anything? You know? I said, in 1776, George Washington's army was starving to death. Bernardo Galvez and a group of Mexicanos drove cattle to Washington, D.C. so that the army could be fed and you could beat the British. In 1860, you had a little revolution with the Emancipation Proclamation, and the biggest supporter of the South was France, because France wanted to get Louisiana all the way to Florida. They made a little mistake on Mayo's 5th of May, 1862. They invaded Puebla, and 3,000 Mexicans with machetes defeated 8,000 Frenchmen with rifles. You want to learn more history, fella? You know? And so that bill got passed, and we had the Tejano Monument. Going down forward, we said we need some money, and so the legislature again passed a bill providing $1,080,000 of state money for the construction of the monument. It wasn't enough, but that got started. And so we started going forward, and as we created the monument, and one of the plaques, there's 5 plaques in front, and they're each one for a century, 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800, and 1900. The 1800 talked about the independence of Texas from Spain, and one of the plaque indicates that many Mexicans died in the Battle of Medina in San Antonio, fighting the Spanish army. Again, Mr. Smarty said, actually, it's only a few. I said, for my own edification, can you tell me how many is few and how many is many? 1 in 3? 1 in 10? 10 in 100? 100 in 1,000? So he sat there, huh? I go, how many is few? How many is many? I said, see, you can't, because it has to do with expectations. Let me give you an example. If I were to get angry and jump over this desk and slap you 3 times, you're going to say I hit you many times. But if I pull out my wallet and put out 3 $1 bills for that $10,000 research project, I gave you a few bucks. 3 both times. I won the argument again. So that's why folks said, this guy no se le raja nadie. And so we raised the money. The fact that International Bank of Commerce was my family, they fully committed, and they contributed about $500,000 to the monument. But not only that, then they induced other people. They induced Taylor West, an advertising agency, to advertise the Tejano Monument. They induced KGB Texas to do the public relations. And then a lot of our customers were, and so I was amazed that we had people from New York, from Knoxville, Tennessee, from Mexico City giving me checks of $10,000 and $25,000. So we raised about $1,450,000 or something like that. So we got up to about $2.5 million, which was adequate. We started the construction, got it finished, and along the way we were trying to get the mariachi program at the University of Texas up to par. And so I met with Zeke Castro and with Dean Doug Dempster, and provided some funding for the mariachi program, and we had a tremendous unveiling ceremony. And so that kind of gives you a taste of what I do, and we're going to get the job done. And I really appreciate what Maggie has done. I appreciate working with the mariachi program, working with the Voces program, and particularly with the Tejano Monument. I thank you for your honor. I want to say one more thing. I'm 85. I'm not the old horseman that used to be. I used to ride bucking horses, and not anymore.
All right, we want to introduce Mariachi Paredes, directed by UT Professor Greg Cavazos. Make some noise for them.
sé. No sé por qué realmente tú a mí ya no me interesas. A mí ya no me interesas. A mí ya no me interesas. No sé por qué realmente tú a mí ya no me interesas. A mí ya no me interesas. A mí ya no me interesas.
Excellent. Well, now we'll be wrapping up today's conference. And to do that, I'm going to bring back to the stage Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez and James Alderete. Make some noise for them, please.
We had some beautiful words on that video, but I just want to take 1 second before you're on for a photo. This whole room knows your history, and what Richard Raymond said that he sees Abakema always in you. Your career started as an educator, we see your educator's heart constantly. And we have a room full of people that continue to educate and share their stories, and we just want to thank you one more time.
For me, this has just been such a treat to be in a room with so many mentors and heroes, and I'm very appreciative. I want to say a quick couple of thank yous. Our chair for this event was unable to join us tonight, but he's been instrumental. So I just want to say thank you to everyone in Las who helped us been through with Voces through thick and thin. Like Congressman Castro, please, give him a applause. Like Congressman Castro, he's a legacy. Congressman Castro's mom is part of the Voces archives. He was parents were the original founders of VOC and are a major part of our archives as well. Also, just want to thank everyone who shared. Dr. Garcia learned so much on the panel. We saw one chart that showed just the increase in spending, especially for South Texas colleges. But the reality I want to make sure people are aware is there's another chart that I can pull up that shows the decrease in state spending and what it takes to fund higher education. If you see any new building, if you see any new initiative, if you see interns, they're very likely funded by private dollars. What it takes to compete in higher education is tougher and tougher. You heard from Dr. Gonzalez and from the panel previously, the political winds of the wind, you have programs that are being kind of silenced on that. And so it's incredibly important that we rely on so many individual donors. I do want to say a special thank you to the IBC Bank family for supporting us for this event and for helping us honor this event. I want to say a special thanks to that even though we have this tough environment in higher education spending and that it really takes private development, that there is a loving support system within the UT community.
So I wanted, if you take a look on the back, please join me in just saying a special thanks to all the collaboration, the mutual support, and the love that we have here with the different UT colleges. Some people want us to kind of say, what is Voces doing the next 25 years? And really, I want to take a second because I've heard these panels and Hector and so many others, what I heard is, what are we going to be like without history helping provide context, without history helping provide accountability, without history showing the full fabric of what it is for the American story? And so again, if you have a chance to join us in this effort, this has been an individual effort, passion project. Again, I want to say that we do have a staff, but Dr. Maggie has never received a penny compensation on for Voces. She teaches on the sidelines. She leads up the Center for Mexican Studies. And this has been a passion of love. And I hope that tonight, if you have the opportunity to share in that journey, I know everyone paid to be here, and I know there's sponsors, but you can still go back and visit Voces at 25.org. And help join us and make sure this continues. And if you have people you want to introduce us to, please reach out to me, James O'Beth, reach out to Dr. Maggie. We'd love to talk to them. We'd love to kind of share the Voces story and how we can involve more people in it. And I just want to repeat, we saw what one person can do with Mr. Ramirez. We've seen what a room of people can do when there's a movement here together. But I want to take a moment because it does require all of us to help share these stories. But there's a 5'1" or 5'2" woman who has made Voces 25 years, who built up an incredible archive. And if we could, this is my standing ovation ask, but I'd like to say thank you to my
Thank you all so much. James just made me taller. I'm actually only 5 feet tall. And I'm not even the shortest one in my family. I have two sisters here who are even shorter than I am. But you know what? It doesn't take a lot of height to do this kind of work. And most of us of our color are pretty short. So I've never been ashamed of being short. It doesn't take a lot of height. What it does take a lot of is all of you who have been part of this for so many years. Some of you, like Annette Gonzalez from the very beginning, when we were doing focus groups in Los Angeles and San Antonio, to try to come up with the best questions to ask our World War II veterans and civilians of that era. So they asked me to say just a few words about a little bit about where Voces is going. And I can't pretend to know the future about that. But what I can tell you is this. We have been doing this work for 25 years. We have over 1,800 interviews, mostly in high-quality video. We have over 25,000 photographs that we've scanned, and this material gets used in so many different ways, in books, in documentaries, in journal articles. It's a gold mine. So one of the things we're looking for is to make sure that we're preserving this at the kind of quality and the excellence that we really strive for. You know, people know that I'm a pain in the neck. I am a pain in the neck because when I don't like something that we're doing, I make us do it again. And I make us do it again, do it again, do it again until it's at that level that it should be at. And I do believe that we need to strive for excellence in everything we do, because you know what? Our community deserves it. And so even if it means that it takes us longer to do it, and it takes more hours to do it, more knowledge or skills to do it, more money to do it, we're going to keep on striving for that excellence. Way before I had kids, and my two sons are here, they've been volunteers for Voces, draftees they say, since they were little. But before I had my sons, I used to run marathons in El Paso. I lived in El Paso. And in El Paso, you have the scenic drive. So I would run up Scenic Hill Drive on a training run with a group. We had a group of runners. So the thing about running up Scenic Drive, is it Scenic Drive? So I go up and I think, oh, good, I'm almost at the summit. And then I get to that point and I realize it's a switchback, there's another. So I get to that point, oh, I'm nearly there, and it's over and over again. Regardless of how many times I did this, I was still like, my brain was still saying, I'm almost there, and if I'm crap, there's still left to go. But that's what this work is. That's like you reach a certain level and then you realize, oh my God, there's more work to do. You reach that certain level and you have a different vantage point and you realize there's that other obstacle in our way. There's that other challenge that we have to meet. Time and time again. Anybody who's done this kind of work knows that that's exactly what it is. It is hard work. That's why I really have to applaud the work of Plenary and everybody else who's been on this panel to get up here. Because I know how much it takes. And I know that all of these efforts have to come from the heart. You have to believe in it, and you have to hang on and be tenacious, even when you're tired and you really just feel like giving up and saying, that's enough. I'm going to take a vacation from this for a few months, and you can't. No te rajes, that's exactly right. No nos vamos a rajar. So at every level that we've done this work, I've realized we have something else to do. So from the beginning, we were saying, okay, we're going to record these interviews. And we're going to preserve these interviews. We've done that. And so years ago, we started saying, we need to make sure that our kids have access to these, that they're able to see these interviews. We have teaching guides. So we spent a lot of money on producing some teacher guides. And we distributed to all the public schools in AISD, all the fourth graders, fifth graders, whatever it is we teach in the history. And my younger son was in that grade at the time. So we produced all of these, we had a really great allies there, and they said, you distribute these, all the material, like little trading cards and a big fat manual, and we're producing newspapers, distribute, give them to us, and we'll distribute these to all the fourth graders. So we did that. And so my little boy would come home from school and say, Augustine, did you learn about Latinos in World War II today? No. Over and over. No. So the teacher said, excuse me, no, I do this World War II thing. And we produced all this material for your grades. And Augustine taught y'all how to use it. And she says, well, no, because we already have our kind of like our syllabus, we have the things we're going to do. And for us to do it, it's going to take more work. So then I talked to these education experts. They said, you really have to promote it. You have to go to the social studies council meetings at the state level. Every state has them, and then there's the national one. You have to go to these interviews, and you have to promote them. So now it's not only that we're recording them, it's not only that we're preserving them, it's not only that we're disseminating, because we were disseminating all this, we have to promote. We have to promote. We need to let people know that that material is there and that it's there for them to use. When you look at it that way, you realize it ain't done. We've got to that summit and realize that's another one that we've got to do. My grandmother from Monterrey, my mother's mother, was like 4'10", and probably weighed 80 pounds. That was our standard femininity growing up, being very tiny and very petite. I stopped weighing 80 pounds when I was in 6th grade. But anyway, my grandmother worked in the fields with my mom during the Depression. The whole family had to work in the fields because they lost everything. So they were in the Depression, they were working in the fields, and my mother would tell the story, and I could see it, that my grandmother would go. She'd go to the edge of the fields and she'd see acres and acres and acres. And she would say, bueno, hay que avanzar. And that's how I feel about this. That even when we know there's so much more work, we have to do it. Hay que avanzar, and I hope everybody here is able to take up that torch and do what you can to promote one another. Every time we've done these interviews, people look at each other in a different way. They see a new appreciation. They say, you know what? I'm really important. What I've done is really important. And what my father did, what my mother did, that's really important. So I hope we all do that. We promote each other. And we promote each other's work, wherever it is, in Dallas, in Everett, wherever it is. Because that's the only way that all together we're going to advance. Thank you so much.
Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez, give her a round of applause. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of today's programming. Thank you so much for being here with us and being such an intensive crowd, a really warm crowd. I know I can only speak for myself, but this was a wonderful day, and I'm very thankful to have spent it all with you. I hope that you'll join us for the closing reception. It's going to be taking place out here on the concourse. And I've been instructed that people can take the flowers. I don't know if they can take the whole piece. Do it quinceañera style. You can take the flowers home with you and give them a new life. Thank you, everyone.